What we're going to do right now is take you through this story day by day, starting with day number 1. Thursday, December 26th, and the Ramsey home is festively decorated. Little JonBenet Ramsey, the winner of several children's pageants, had just received a bicycle as a Christmas gift the day before. 5:30 a.m., JonBenet's mother, Patsy, goes downstairs and finds an apparent ransom note, 3 pages long.
I couldn't read the whole thing. I just gotten up. We were on it was the day after Christmas, and we were going to go visiting. And it was quite early in the morning, and I had gotten dressed and was on my way to the kitchen to make some coffee. And we have a back staircase from the bedroom areas, and I always come down that staircase, and I'm usually the first one down. And the note was lying across the 3 pages across the run of one of the stair treads. And it was kind of dimly lit. It was very early in the morning. And I started to read it, and it was addressed to John. It said, Mr. Ramsey. And it said, we have your daughter. And it just wasn't registering. And I may have gotten through another sentence, like, I can't, we have your daughter, and I don't know if I got any further than that. And I immediately ran back upstairs and pushed open her door, and she was not in her bed. And I screamed for John.
The note asked for $118,000 and told the Ramseys to wait for a phone call.
We'd waited until after the time that the call was supposed to have been made to us. And one of the detectives asked me and my friend who was there to go through every inch of the house, see if there's anything that was unusual or abnormal that looked out of place.
Something for clues,
I think she was asking us to do that more to give us something to do, to occupy our mind. And so we started in the basement, and we're just looking, and we have one room in the basement that when I opened the door, there are no windows in that room, and I turned the light on, and
she was in the room.
It was her. I hoped that she was still okay, but I could tell that she probably wasn't. I screamed and carried her upstairs.
JonBenet Ramsey, 6 years old, had been strangled, sexually assaulted, had her mouth duct taped, her hands bound, her skull fractured. Friday, December 27th, the investigation of Boulder's first and only homicide of the year intensifies.
I can tell you at this point, there is no information that lead us towards any suspect or identifiable suspect at this time.
The community learns more about the Ramseys. John is a prominent businessman, president of a computer company. Patsy is a former Miss West Virginia. Saturday, December 28th, the Ramsey family heads to the police station to answer questions and give hair, blood, and handwriting samples.
Well, Patsy and I, Burke, our son, who's 9, every family member.
Including your 2 elder children. Were you offended by that?
It was difficult, but, they need to know, our handprints are all over our home. So they need to know if there are other ones.
One of the things they told us, we had some initial reactions as to who might have been involved, and they said, well, that's good, but we don't want to draw the focus in tight yet. We've got to look at everything.
Sunday, December 29th, as the Ramsey family flies to Atlanta where they used to live, 30 Boulder officers are now working the case. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation lends support by conducting forensic tests. Monday, the 30th, a city spokesperson tries to quiet any alarm in Boulder.
We have had some questions about whether or not people in the neighborhood should feel concerned. We want to let them know that there are still police in that neighborhood 24 hours a day. There is no need for a special concern.
It's also revealed that the Ramseys have hired attorneys to represent them. Tuesday, December 31st, 200 family members and friends attend an emotional funeral service at the family's former church in Atlanta.
To be honest, the mind cannot grasp and the heart refuses to accept the death of one so young, who is suddenly taken from us by cruelty and malice by some unworthy person or persons.
JonBenet's body is buried in nearby Marietta next to her half-sister who had been killed in a car accident 4 years ago. In the days ahead, a sea of flowers would appear at JonBenet's gravesite, left by anonymous mourners. January 1st, New Year's Day. As the mystery grows, John and Patsy Ramsey talk to CNN.
If I were a resident of Boulder, I would tell my friends to keep your baby close to you.
The Ramseys also announced they will hire their own investigators and offer a reward for help in finding JonBenet's killer. Thursday, January 2nd. 5 Boulder cops have arrived in the Atlanta area because the family used to live here. They conduct interviews and background checks. In Boulder, the city's mayor, having heard Mrs. Ramsey's warning the day before, tries to downplay any alarm.
There was no visible sign of forced entry. The body was found in a place where people are saying someone had to know the house. So there isn't a crazed killer on the loose wandering the streets of Boulder.
Friday, January 3rd. As police continue to scour the Ramseys' Boulder home for clues, the Ramseys fly home. Some radio talk shows are now rife with speculation the Ramseys might be involved in their daughter's murder.
Nauseating beyond belief.
You know, America has just been hurt so deeply with the tragic things that have happened. The young woman who drove her children into the water, and we don't know what happened with the O.J. Simpson. And I mean, America is suffering because they have lost faith in the American family.
Saturday, January 4th. Boulder police are now in Michigan at the Ramsey summer home looking for any evidence of threats against the family. At their Boulder home, police finally removed the crime scene tape surrounding it. Sunday, January 5th. The Ramseys, staying with friends in town, attend church. The media have descended on Boulder in full force. A public relations consultant hired by the Ramseys announces the church visit and tries to keep the journalists in line. In the meantime, the private investigators hired by the family are now searching the Ramseys' house. Monday, January 6th. Children return from vacation to school in Boulder and in gentle terms hear why their classmate, little JonBenet, will not be returning. Tuesday, January 7th. Police announced the search warrant of the Boulder home has been sealed. Evidence seized from the house will not be made public for at least a month. Still no suspects.
We have never contended that anyone is or is not a suspect. We have not ruled anybody in, nor have we ruled anybody out.
Wednesday, January 8th. Leaks in the case, many unsubstantiated, continue to dribble in. There's word of a practice ransom note, a report that the family's been ruled out as having written the note, even speculation that a foreign group may have written it. But 2 weeks have now passed. The killer of JonBenet Ramsey is still at large. And people wonder who could have killed this little girl.
If I were a resident of Boulder, I would tell my friends to keep your baby's close to you. There's someone out there.
Are you fully convinced that your daughter was kidnapped by some outsiders outside your family or circle of friends?
Yes.
There is a killer on the loose. I don't know who it is. I don't know if it's a he or a she. But if I were a resident of Boulder, I would tell my friends to keep your babies close to you. There's someone out there. Keep your babies close to you. There's someone out there.
To those of you who may want to ask, let me address very directly, I did not kill my daughter, JonBenet. There have also been innuendos that she has been or was sexually molested. I can tell you those were the most hurtful innuendos to us as a family. They are totally false. JonBenet and I had a very close relationship. I will miss her dearly for the rest of my life.
I'm Patsy Ramsey, JonBenet's mother, and I'm grateful that we are finally able to meet together face to face. I'm appalled that anyone would think that John or I would be involved in such a hideous, heinous crime. But let me assure you that I did not kill JonBenet. I did not have anything to do with it. I love that child with my whole of my heart and soul.
Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, what do you want to say to the killer of your daughter?
We'll find you. We will find you. I have that as a sole mission for the rest of my life.
Mrs. Ramsey?
Likewise, the police and investigators have assured us that this is a case which can be solved. You know, you may be eluding the authorities for a time, but God knows who you are, and we will find you.
I think one of the issues that was distressing to us, and it perhaps caused some bias of opinion, is why did we bring lawyers into this process early on? And I can tell you both how that happened and why it happened. The how is that on the day after the tragedy, we were being consoled by friends and family, and a close friend of mine who was also a practicing attorney took me aside and said, "John, I see some things developing here that I would like to ask your permission to do some things that I think are necessary to be done." And I said, "Fine, do it." And so he retained counsel for Patsy and I. And we later learned, and really later was really the next few days, that the reason he did this is that sadly for our country, most tragedies of this nature, the killing of a child, apparently in the majority of cases are family related, and I think that's a tragic statement for our country. But because we were the parents of JonBenet, we were automatically put in the suspect pool, and so to not have knowledgeable counsel, my close friend felt would be foolish. Now, we also at that time, as a parent, I looked at retaining of attorneys. We also brought in a couple of investigative firms, some experts that we assembled, I felt a very helpless feeling as to what can I do to help solve this case. Had it been in my power, I would have called out the National Guard, frankly. So as we looked at this group of people that we pulled together, it was not only to advise us in this process, but hopefully to assist the investigation to a closure. We have spoken with the police. We spoke with the police approximately 8 hours on the 26th, another 2 hours on the 27th. Have supplied them with every piece of information we have. So the impression that we haven't spoken with the police is totally false. What we have, what has been delayed has been this formal interrogation of us as suspects. And frankly, we were, as you might imagine, insulted that we would even be considered suspects in the death of our daughter, and felt that an interrogation of us was a waste of our time and a waste of the police's time. But because they have to do this, we're willing to do it, but not under any circumstance that was presented to us.
You know, we would like to think that we don't know anyone that we have ever met in our lives who could do such a thing to a child. You know, but they talked with us and said, please tell us names of people, you know, who may have been in your home at any time. You know, we just outpoured information just as much as we could try to remember. But, you know, no one specifically came to mind. I mean, you can't imagine such a horrible thing ever happening, much less somebody that you may know.
You know, at first we were shocked and then outraged, and then we understood statistically that's a sad state of affairs, that's apparently in the majority of cases like this in our country, family members or parents are ultimately involved. And so we accepted being suspects, but what concerned us, and certainly still does concern us, at least up till yesterday, is that any time spent looking at us is time that's wasted. And that in part is why we brought in an investigative team as well, too. An arrest is absolutely necessary in our lives for closure. Our lives cannot go on the same as they might have had JonBenet still been here. But I know how I feel today, and that an arrest must be made for us to go on with some semblance of a life and hope for the future. Yeah.
One of the things that one of the reasons we asked you all to be here this morning is that we need your help from this moment on. I know you have been diligently covering this case, and we have appreciated some of what you've said. I have to be frank, not all of what you've said. But we need to all work together as a team, and we need your help. Some of you may have seen the ad that we placed in our local Daily Camera newspaper this past weekend. This reward money has been offered since the death of JonBenet, but we felt like it wasn't getting out to the public enough. So this ad with her most recent kindergarten picture will be appearing more and more frequently. And what we want to let everyone know is that this $100,000 reward is for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the killer of our daughter. We feel like there are at least 2 people on the face of this earth that know who did this, and that is the killer and someone that person may have confided in. And we need that one phone call. We need the one phone call to this number that will help the authorities come to a conclusion to this case. Please, Please, if you know anything, I beg you to call us.
I would absolutely want the most severe penalty that could be brought. Patsy? Yes, Rudy.
Were questioned by Boulder authorities in a Colorado police station. These tapes have never before been seen publicly.
There's been a lot of speculation by a lot of people that maybe you didn't know anything about the murder, but maybe Patsy did.
Questioning John is Lou Smith, a homicide detective then working for the Boulder DA's office.
It's preposterous.
I mean, Patsy loves both her children dearly, but frankly, she and JonBenet were extremely close.
A Christmas morning photo of the kids.
Detective Tom Haney questioned Patsy, who at the time was taking medication for both anxiety and depression.
If I told you right now that we have trace evidence that appears to link you to the death of JonBenet, what would you tell me?
That is totally impossible. Go retest.
How is it impossible?
I did not kill my child. I didn't have a thing to do with it.
And I'm not talking somebody's guess or some rumor or some story.
I don't care what you're talking about.
I'm talking about scientific evidence.
I don't give a flying flip how scientific it is. Go back to the damn drawing board. I didn't do it. John Ramsey didn't do it, and we didn't have a clue of anybody who did do it. So we all got to start working together from here this day forward to try to find out who the hell did it.
48 Hours Investigates has acquired these tapes, hours upon hours of footage that take you inside the investigation. While the tapes show how strongly prosecutors believe John and Patsy Ramsey were responsible for the death of their daughter, frankly, there isn't a lot of physical evidence that links them. So questioners looked for inconsistencies and focused on minute details from the crime scene.
What have you heard about the pineapple?
Well, we were asked, did JonBenet eat pineapple? And because apparently it was found in her system. I think part of the question was, what did she eat it in when she got home? I'm sure she didn't, because she was absolutely sound asleep.
The Ramseys told police that JonBenet had gone straight to bed that night and had not eaten at home. But autopsy results did find undigested pineapple in JonBenet's stomach. And police discovered fingerprints on a bowl of pineapple left in the family's dining room on the morning of the murder.
I didn't put the bowl there, okay? I did not put the bowl there. I would not do this setup like this.
Okay, but let's go back to your line of reasoning here. If they weren't, no, talk to me.
Okay.
Look at me.
Okay.
If they're not yours and they're not John's, then they would be somebody else's.
Right.
But now, I'm telling you, they're not somebody else's. Those prints belong to one of the two of you.
They did? You're sure? Well, I don't know. I did not put that there.
Sometimes the simplest, most obscure little thing can be so significant.
Right. I did not feed JonBenet pineapple. Okay. So I don't know how it got in her stomach. I don't know where this bowl of pineapple came from. I can't recall putting that there.
You were shown, photographed wearing a red coat.
It's kind of a black and red and gray fleeced.
Bruce Levin from the Boulder District Attorney's Office led the questioning.
Mrs. Ramsey, I have scientific evidence from forensic scientists that say that there's fibers in the paint tray that match your red jacket.
The paint tray is significant because a brush from it, along with some rope, was used to strangle and sexually abuse JonBenet.
We believe that fibers from her jacket were found in the paint tray, were found tied into the ligature found on JonBenet's neck, were found on the blanket that she's wrapped in, were found on the duct tape that's found on her mouth. I have no evidence from any scientist to suggest that those fibers are from any source other than your red jacket.
Well, but yeah, that's, come on, I mean, what other sources did they test?
Patsy's attorney, Lynn Wood, asked prosecutors to produce the evidence. When they wouldn't, he refused to let Patsy go on the record.
JonBenet got up, and somebody in that house, legally, lawfully in that house, one of the three of you, also happens to be up, or gets up because she makes noise. And there's some discussion, or something happens, there's an accident, somebody...
You're going down the wrong path, buddy.
Okay. Somebody accidentally, or somebody gets upset over bedwetting. That's one of the things that's been proposed. Okay.
Didn't happen. If she got up in the night and ran into somebody, it was somebody there that wasn't supposed to be there. I don't know what transpired after that, whether it was an accident, intentional, premeditated, or whatnot. But it was not one of her 3 family members that were also in that house. Period. End of statement. I mean, I appreciate being here. I appreciate it. It's very hard to be here, but it is a damn sight harder to be sitting at home in Atlanta, Georgia, wondering every second of every day what you guys are doing out here. You know, have you found anything? Are we any closer? Is the guy out here watching my house? You know, is my son safe? My life has been hell from that day forward. And I want nothing more than to find out who is responsible for this.
What has thrown great suspicion in you, Mrs. Ramsey, as you know, is that some handwriting experts have said that there's a similarity between the writing on this note and your handwriting. This has been inconclusive, but the similarity of the handwriting is the strongest piece of evidence implicating you.
Well, if that's the strongest, then there's not much of a case. I found my daughter missing from her bedroom, and several hours later, our daughter was found dead in our home.
And you don't feel it was a member of your own family? Is that correct?
No, sir.
That's
It was
fine.
not a member of my family.
Okay. Mrs. Ramsey, I'm going to show you a document. I'd like you to look at it and take your time. And I'm going to ask you if you recognize the photograph. Can you identify any of the individuals in the photograph?
Just JonBenet.
Okay. I would like you to now look at the handwriting below the photograph. Do you recognize the handwriting?
Not particularly.
All right. Do you, so you say not particularly, you don't recognize this as being your handwriting, is that correct?
I don't remember writing it. Is that what you mean? I mean,
But-
I don't know. I may have.
All right, but do you recognize the handwriting as being your handwriting?
No.
Okay. Now we're going to go to another exhibit. Do you recognize any of the handwriting as being your handwriting?
Not particularly.
So you couldn't say with any degree of certainty that that was your handwriting?
No.
Mrs. Ramsey, what I'm showing you is a series of letters, and I'm not identifying their source. I'm just simply showing you a series of letters. I'd like you to look at them carefully. Can you, without knowing the source or where these letters are from, identify any of them?
No, sir.
I'd like you to look at the letter B and tell me if those B's look at all similar to you.
Well, they're both lowercase b's.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything about the B's that to you look similar beside the fact that they're lowercase? The way they're drawn?
No, not particularly.
Okay, I'm going to ask you then to look to the letter above the letter that we've identified as B and what looks like it could be a G. And I'm going to ask you to look at the G.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to ask you whether or not you see any similarities between the G's and what those similarities are.
Well, they're both lowercase g.
Mm-hmm.
They're both more the same size than the b's are.
Mm-hmm. What about the way in which what looks like what could be described as a tail with the G? Is there any similarity with respect to that?
It swings to the left.
Right. Do they look similar, the tails, to the G?
Somewhat. I mean, it's a
Just
G. You make a G with the tail to the left.
Okay.
Is that what you mean? One's squiggly and one is smoother.
As
I
a
would say they're
layperson,
most
you could say-
similar in
or
size.
dissimilar.
The one
So
on the
you-
right is more shaky, it looks like.
And what about the one on the left?
It's not as shaky. And the one on the right has a little swoop up on the tail, and the one on the left does not.
Right.
The one on the left has a thicker circle of part of the G, and the one on the right.
The next objects or letters look like they might be O's, the letter O. Please point out any similarities or dissimilarities that you see.
I don't think they look a thing alike. One
Similarities.
is large, one is small, one is really heavy and feathered, kind of, and one is smoother.
Any other similarities or dissimilarities before I move on that you'd like to?
They both have an opening in the middle.
Were you aware there was a part in the ransom note where you were told not to contact authorities?
I think I read that later.
Did you think that there might be a chance that if you called a group of people over to the house and it was being observed that the kidnappers might in fact see that you disobeyed the condition of their ransom note?
Well, that just didn't go through my mind at that time.
Okay. Whose idea was it to call all the people that eventually arrived, your friends or whatever, that came afterwards?
Oh, I did that.
Okay. Can you tell me why you did that?
It just seemed instinctive. It was just kind of a very stressful time, and I just called on friends.
Had you read the ransom note by that time?
I don't think I had read all of it, no.
Mr. Ramsey, I'm going to ask you to look at the document that's been marked Plaintiff's Exhibit 16 for identification, and I'm going to ask you if you recognize this document.
Yes, I believe I do.
Could you identify it, please?
Well, it appears to be a copy of the ransom note that we found in our home.
Does it look substantially like the ransom note that you saw that morning?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Now, Mr. Ramsey, I'm going to ask you to once again look at it, and I'm going to ask you if, in looking at it, whether or not you see any similarity between your wife's handwriting and the handwriting in the ransom note, you personally.
Absolutely not.
None at all?
No.
Not even a little bit?
Not even a little bit.
All right. Now, Mr. Ramsey.
Patsy writes very neatly. She's a feminine writer.
Right.
There's misspellings in the note. She graduated at the top of her class. She doesn't misspell words like business and possession.
Do you think the ransom note writer was trying to disguise their identity?
I've been told that that was the intent, but there are parts of it that where that's broken down. I don't know which parts, but.
Do you think that maybe some of the misspelling may have been an attempt by whoever was writing this note to disguise their identity?
I don't think so, because I think they tried to be very articulate to the best of their ability, and the misspellings were because they didn't know how to spell those words.
With respect to the sloppiness of the handwriting, do you think it's possible that the handwriting, the person who wrote this handwriting was trying to make their handwriting look sloppier than normal?
I don't know. It's very sloppy handwriting. I would agree with that.
Mr. Ramsey, were you ever told that Mrs. Ramsey could not be eliminated from any of the handwriting investigation being done by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation? Did anybody ever tell you that?
I was told that it was virtually certain that she did not write the note, but that there were some similarities which exist in all of our handwriting because we've all been taught the same, and that's how we communicate is with the written language in English. But that because of these few similarities, she could not be absolutely eliminated, but it was highly improbable that she wrote the note. And that in fact, there were more dissimilarities in her writing than a number of other people that have been looked at.
Right. Do you know if your handwriting was examined by the law enforcement?
As far as I know, it was.
Do you know whether or not you were eliminated as the author of the note?
I was told that on a scale of 1 to 5, Patsy was placed at a 4.5 in terms of probability. In other words, a very low probability. Mine was a 5.
I'm going to ask you if you recognize, without naming anybody, any of the figures in that particular document.
I think I recognize 2.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you to look at the handwriting beneath the document, and I'm going to ask you if you recognize that handwriting.
I do not.
Could it be your wife's handwriting?
I don't recognize it. It doesn't look like Patsy's writing. It's sloppy. irregular. I would not look at that and say that's Patsy's handwriting.
Thank you. Now I'm going to hand you Plaintiff's Exhibit number 2 that was marked for identification yesterday, and I'm going to ask you to please look at that. Now I'm going to ask you if you can identify, without naming the individuals in those photographs, any of them.
Yes.
Now I'm going to ask you to look at the handwriting and tell me if you can recognize the handwriting.
I do not.
Could that be your wife's handwriting?
I doubt it very seriously.
Can you tell me why you don't think it's your wife's handwriting?
It doesn't look like her handwriting. It's sloppy. It just doesn't look like her handwriting. No, I do not base my opinion on the reports that I've heard from others. I base my opinion on that I know my wife. I would stake my life on the fact that she did not murder her child. She did not fake all of this nonsense, and she did not write this bizarre note. That's what I stake my belief on, Mr. Hoffman.
So it's not based on anything empirical, such as reports?
The empirical information supports that belief, totally.
I'm just wanting to determine whether you're familiar with the empirical information that supports it.
Yes.
I'm trying to distinguish between your belief in your wife, which is understandable, and a belief that comes from actually having looked at forensic evidence that you personally have had an opportunity to view. In light of the fact that you have admitted that you have not physically seen the handwriting reports themselves, but maybe relying on summaries from the people around you, why are you so certain that Mrs. Ramsey is not the ransom note writer?
Because I know my wife. I know how much she loved JonBenet. I know how much she valued life. She valued every day that she lived, and lived every day to its fullest as if it were a gift from God.
Are you aware that there are handwriting experts that are working on behalf of Chris Wolf who have concluded that Patsy Ramsey is, as one of them said, without doubt, the ransom note writer?
They're wrong. And they've made probably a serious career-limiting decision if that, in fact, is their statement.
Probably
because
like
that's
Donald.
something that neither the CBI, the FBI, the Secret Service, nor the top experts in this country have ever said. In fact, quite the contrary.
How do you know that, Mr. Ramsey? That they've
I've
never
heard
said
statements from the police. I've heard statements from the district attorney. I've heard the results of what we consider, and most people would consider, the top handwriting experts and linguistic experts in the country, all of which have said highly improbable that Patsy wrote the note.
Yet you've never actually seen any of these reports.
I have never read any of the reports. They've never physically been given to me. I think Patsy was very clear that she did identify handwriting that she recognized as hers.
And quite frankly, she may very well have been telling the truth.
What might be interesting.
Frankly, she was telling the truth, Mr. Hoffman.
We are not afraid to face even our most vile opponent, of which I consider the National Enquirer to be one of the most vile. And, you know, we have faced Steve Thomas, we have faced the National Enquirer, we have nothing to hide, and I'm facing you today, Mr. Hoffman.
Okay.
What do you think about these fibers?
After John discovered the body and she was brought to the living room, when I laid eyes on her, I knelt down and hugged her. But I had my whole body on her body. My sweater fibers or whatever I had on that morning
are going to transfer to her clothing.
We believe that fibers from her jacket were found in the paint tray, were found tied into the ligature found on JonBenet's neck, were found on the blanket that she's wrapped in, were found on the duct tape that's found on her mouth. I have no evidence from any scientist to suggest that those fibers are from any source other than your red jacket.
I believe she committed the murder, I told Smith, and proceeded to lay out what I thought had happened. In my hypothesis, an approaching 40th birthday, the busy holiday season, an exhausting Christmas day, and an argument with JonBenet had left Patsy frazzled. Her beautiful daughter, whom she frequently dressed almost as a twin, had rebelled against wearing the same outfit as her mother. When they came home, John Ramsey helped Burke put together a Christmas toy. JonBenet, who had not eaten much at the White's party, was hungry. Her mother let her have some pineapple, and then the kids were put to bed. John Ramsey read to his little girl. Then he went to bed. Patsy stayed up to prepare for the trip to Michigan the next morning, a trip she admittedly did not particularly want to make. Later, JonBenet awakened after wetting her bed, as indicated by the plastic sheets, the urine stains, the pull-up diaper package hanging halfway out of a cabinet, and the balled-up turtleneck found in the bathroom. I concluded that the little girl had worn the red turtleneck to bed, as her mother originally said, and that it was stripped off when it got wet. As I told Smith, I never believed that the child was sexually abused for the gratification of the offender, but the vaginal trauma was some sort of corporal punishment. The dark fibers found in her pubic region could have come from the violent wiping of a wet child. Patsy probably yanked out the diaper package in cleaning up JonBenet. Patsy would not be the first mother to lose control in such a situation. One of the doctors we consulted cited toileting issues as a textbook example of causing a parental rage. So in my hypothesis, there was some sort of explosive encounter in the child's bathroom sometime prior to 1 o'clock in the morning, the time suggested by the digestion rate of the pineapple found in the child's stomach. I believe JonBenet was slammed against a hard surface, such as the edge of a tub, inflicting a mortal head wound. She was unconscious, but her heart was still beating. Patsy would not have known that JonBenet was still alive because the child already appeared to be dead. The massive head trauma would have eventually killed her. It was the critical moment in which she had to either call for help or find an alternative explanation for her daughter's death. It was accidental in the sense that the situation had developed without motive or premeditation. She could have called for help but chose not to. An emergency room doctor probably would have questioned the accident and called the police. Still, little would have happened to Patsy in Boulder, but I believe panic overtook her. John and Burke continued to sleep while Patsy moved the body of JonBenet down to the basement and hid her in the little room. As I pictured the scene, her dilemma was that the police would assume the obvious if a 6-year-old child was found dead in a private home without any satisfactory explanation. Patsy needed a diversion and planned the way she thought a kidnapping should look. She returned upstairs to the kitchen and grabbed her tablet and felt-tip pen, flipping to the middle of the tablet, and started a ransom note, drafting one that ended on page 25. For some reason, she discarded that one and ripped pages 17 through 25 from the tablet. Police never found those pages. On page 26, she began the, quote, Mr. and Mrs. I, close quote, then abandoned that false start. At some point, she drafted the long ransom note. By doing so, she created the government's best piece of evidence. She then faced the major problem of what to do with the body. Leaving the house carried the risk of John or Burke awakening at the sounds and possibly being seen by a passerby or a neighbor. Leaving the body in the distant, almost inaccessible basement room was the best option. As I envisioned it, Patsy returned to the basement, a woman caught up in panic, where she could have seen, perhaps by detecting a faint heartbeat or a sound or a slight movement, that although completely unconscious, JonBenet was not dead. Others might argue that Patsy did not know the child was still alive. In my hypothesis, she took the next step, looking for the closest available items in desperation. Only feet away was her paint tote. She grabbed a paintbrush and broke it to fashion the garret with some cord. Then she looped the cord around the girl's neck. In my scenario, she choked JonBenet from behind with a grip on her broken paintbrush handle, pulling the ligature. JonBenet, still unconscious, would never have felt it. There are only 4 ways to die: suicide, natural, accidental, or homicide. This accident, in my opinion, had just become a murder. Then the staging continued to make it look like a kidnapping. Patsy tied the girl's wrists in front, not in the back, for otherwise the arms would not have been in the overhead position. But with a 15-inch length of cord between the wrists and the knot tied loosely over the clothing, there was no way such a binding would have restrained a live child. It was a symbolic act to make it appear that the child had been bound. Patsy took considerable time with her daughter, wrapping her carefully in the blanket and leaving her with a favorite pink nightgown. As the FBI had told us, a stranger would not have taken such care. As I told Lou, I thought that throughout the coming hours, Patsy worked on her staging, such as placing the ransom note where she would be sure to find it the next morning. She placed the tablet on the countertop right beside the stairs and put the pen in the cup. While going through the drawers and under the countertop, where the tablet had been, she found rolls of tape. She placed a strip from a roll of duct tape across JonBenet's mouth. There was bloody mucus under the tape and a perfect set of the child's lip prints, which did not indicate a tongue impression or resistance. I theorized that Patsy, trying to cover her tracks, took the remaining cord, tape, and the first ransom note out of the house that night, perhaps dropping them in a nearby storm sewer or among the Christmas debris and wrappings in a neighbor's trash can. She was running out of time. The household was scheduled to wake up early to fly to Michigan, and in her haste, Patsy Ramsey did not change clothes, a vital mistake. With the clock ticking and hearing her husband moving around upstairs, she stepped over the edge. The way I envisioned it, Patsy screamed, and John Ramsey, coming out of the shower, responded, totally unaware of what had occurred. Burke, awakened by the noise shortly before 6 o'clock in the morning, came down to find out what had happened and was sent back to bed as his mother talked to the 911 emergency dispatcher. Patsy Ramsey opened the door to Officer Rick French about 5:55 a.m. on the morning of December 26, 1996, wearing a red turtleneck sweater and black pants, the same thing she had worn to a party the night before. Her hair was done, her makeup was on. In my opinion, she had never been to bed. The diversion worked for 7 hours as the Boulder police thought they were dealing with a kidnapping. John Ramsey, in my hypothetical scenario, probably first grew suspicious while reading the ransom note that morning, which was why he was unusually quiet. He must have seen his wife's writing mannerisms all over it, everything but her signature. But where was his daughter? He said in his police interview that he went down to the basement when Detective Arndt noticed him missing. I suggested that Ramsey found JonBenet at that time and was faced with the dilemma of his life. During the next few hours, his behavior changed markedly as he desperately considered his few options: submit to the authorities or try to control the situation. He had already lost one child, Beth, and now JonBenet was gone too. Now Patsy was possibly in jeopardy. The stress increased steadily during the morning, for Patsy, in my theory, knew that no kidnapper was going to call by 10 o'clock, and after John found the body, he knew that too. So when Detective Linda Arndt told him to search the house, he used the opportunity and made a beeline for the basement. Then, tormented as he might be, he chose to protect his wife. Within a few hours, the first of his many lawyers was in motion, the private investigators a day later. That's the way I see it, I said to Lou Smith. That's how the evidence fits to me. She made mistakes, and that's how we solve crimes, right? I reminded him of his own favorite saying, murders are usually what they seem.
What we want to let everyone know is that this $100,000 reward is for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the killer of our daughter. We feel like there are at least 2 people on the face of this earth that know who did this. And that is the killer and someone that that person may have confided in. And we need that one phone call. We need the one phone call to this number that will help the authorities come to a conclusion to this case. Please, please, if you know anything, I beg you to call us. Call us.
How do you want JonBenet remembered? How do you remember her?
Well, I mean, like all parents would say, she was a perfect child, but the thing that I remember about her was that if I would frown, she would look at me and say, Dad, I don't like that face. And I'd smile, and she said, that's better. And that's just the way she was.
She loved her daddy. She loved her daddy. She was daddy's girl.
And I think your dad had said he used the flashlight that night to put you to bed.
Oh, hello.
Nearly 3 years after the murder of JonBenet Ramsey, the case remains unsolved. But the detective who first handled the case has no questions about who is guilty.
I know who killed JonBenet. There's no doubt in my mind who killed JonBenet. And while this investigation is still ongoing, I don't think it's appropriate that I say that name out loud.
Linda Arndt was the first detective on the scene at the Ramsey house on December 26, 1996, the morning John and Patsy Ramsey had reported their 6-year-old daughter JonBenet missing. Arndt was the only officer there for much of the day. She later would be roundly criticized, vilified in the press as responsible for a bungled investigation. Now she's speaking out to set the record straight, telling her side of that dramatic day 3 years ago. It all began with a call at 6:30 in the morning from her sergeant.
He said there's been a kidnapping. It involves a 6-year-old girl. There was a ransom note, a 2.5-page ransom note. And according to the ransom note, there was going to be a phone call from the author, and they were supposed to call between 8 and 10 a.m. So I was supposed to get to the house for purposes of monitoring the phone call.
8:10 a.m., Arndt arrived at the Ramsey home and meets John Ramsey for the first time.
How did he strike you?
Cordial.
Cordial?
Mm-hmm.
Upset?
Cordial.
Distraught?
Cordial.
Did it strike you at all that that was behavior that was unusual for somebody whose child was just kidnapped?
It's been my experience that people respond to trauma in different ways. So if someone has a response that is different from mine, I don't put judgment to it. I'll just note it.
And that is what she says she did all morning, make mental notes of all things curious, including, she says, the fact that Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey remained apart in separate rooms for most of the day. That at one point, she says John Ramsey took time out in the middle of the crisis to read his mail.
I remember seeing John in the kitchen, looking through his mail, and I made a note that he was looking at his mail, and then I wondered, where did your mail come from?
Isn't it possible maybe he was opening the mail looking for a clue from the kidnapper?
I don't know, and I don't speculate. It's a piece of information that I see. It's something that I note.
You thought it was unusual, however.
I can say that it stuck out.
10 a.m., the deadline imposed by the writer of the ransom note for a telephone call.
10 o'clock comes and goes, and there's no acknowledgement within the house from anyone that the deadline imposed by the author of the ransom note has come and gone.
Nobody said it's 10 o'clock and the kidnappers haven't called?
Nobody said that.
Was that something else you took note of?
Absolutely.
By 10:30 in the morning, Arndt was the only police officer in the house with John and Patsy Ramsey, their pastor, and 4 family friends. As they waited for news, the tension was mounting. Arndt called her station house for backup repeatedly, but none had arrived.
How many times did you call the police department asking where your backup was and what was going on?
Well, I remember at least 2 calls. Both times I was told everybody's in a meeting. They got your message, and that was it.
Were you feeling pressure being in charge of a group this large and with anxiety that high?
I felt tremendous pressure.
1:01 p.m. Although the house had already been searched by patrolmen before she arrived, Arndt says that in order to break the building tension, she asked John Ramsey and his friend Fleet White to search the house again, top to bottom, looking for anything out of place. She says she gave them specific instructions not to touch anything. She says John Ramsey headed straight to the basement. She heard Fleet White scream for an ambulance, and then a chilling discovery. For Arndt, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place.
And I see John Ramsey carrying JonBenet up the last 3 steps from the basement. And my mind exploded. And everything that I had noted that morning that stuck out instantly made sense. And JonBenet was clearly dead. Then she's been dead for a while. I ordered him to put JonBenet down. I knelt next to her and I leaned down to her face. And John leaned down opposite me. And his face was just inches from mine. And we had a nonverbal exchange that I will never forget. And he asked if she was dead. And I said, yes, she's dead. And I told him to go back to the room and to dial 911. And as we looked at each other, I remember, and I wore a shoulder holster, tucking my gun right next to me and consciously counting, I've got 18 bullets.
Why did you do that?
Because I didn't know if we'd all be alive when people showed up. I said everything made sense in that instance. And I knew what happened.
Do you think your fear was well-founded?
You bet I do. There's no doubt in my mind.
To this day?
Never wavered.
You were afraid because you thought the killer was still in the house.
I knew it.
Absolutely?
Absolutely.
1:10 p.m., Detective Arndt moved JonBenet's body from the hallway to the living room.
John Ramsey came back into the living room. And he grabbed a throw that was on the back of a chair. And he says, could you please cover her body? And as he's saying it, he's already put the blanket on top of her.
Arndt would later be harshly criticized for 2 key decisions: asking John Ramsey to search the house and allowing John Ramsey to place the blanket on JonBenet's body.
You had to know that that was going to contaminate evidence.
JonBenet's body was in and of itself a crime scene. Would it be nice if John hadn't found JonBenet? Absolutely. And would it be nice if he hadn't put a blanket? Yeah, it would be great. And it would be nice if there were other people to help control and keep people away. That would have been wonderful. But that's not the circumstances that I had available that day.
Still alone in the living room with John Ramsey, Arndt then heard Patsy Ramsey's voice.
And I heard a wail, just a guttural moan, aching wail from the back area. It's probably one of the most pitiful things I've ever heard, and anguished. And I saw the rest of the people, the Patsy and the pastor and the 4 friends, come from the den towards the living room. So I said, if you want to say goodbye to JonBenet, this is the only time you'll have to do it. And, there's just so much. There's so much pain. And I called 911. I gave my radio number. And I said, the kidnapping has turned into a murder.
This house had suddenly become a homicide crime scene.
Oh, it became hell. JonBenet was brought up at about 5 minutes after 1. And at 10 after 1, nobody'd shown up. And I looked out the window to the street and I saw an ambulance slowly drive by. And I thought, I am in the Twilight Zone.
Meanwhile, the pastor led the Ramseys and their friends in prayer in the living room, holding hands as JonBenet's body lay before them.
I thought that would be the best way to organize everyone, to keep them distracted, to keep them from touching JonBenet, and to keep them focused on something other than looking at JonBenet.
1:20 p.m., after 3 hours as the only officer on what Arndt calls an incredibly tense crime scene, and 20 minutes after JonBenet's body was found, backup finally arrived. The next day, the autopsy on JonBenet was conducted. Linda Arndt was there.
I hadn't seen savagery done to a child or even an adult until the doctor peeled back her scalp and saw that horrific fracture to her head. It was the length of her head.
It was 8.5 inches long, and there was something else even more disturbing.
She had trauma to her vagina.
What kind of trauma?
It would be trauma that would be consistent with injuries seen in sexual assault cases.
Recently?
I guess the best way to say that was what was seen was not a first-time injury.
The coroner, in fact, said the evidence was inconclusive, but ABC News has confirmed that 3 medical experts who consulted for the Boulder Police Department concluded the injuries were consistent with prior sexual abuse. As the Ramsey investigation dragged on for weeks, then months, and then years, the criticism of Linda Arndt's actions that December day continued. But she still defends her actions, saying she has become a scapegoat for a flawed investigation. And Linda Arndt remains convinced that she knows who killed JonBenet Ramsey. She will not say the killer's name, but has no doubt that justice will never be done.
Do you think this person will ever be indicted, will ever be charged or convicted?
No.
What you're saying is, whoever killed JonBenet will get away with murder.
Yes.
The first question has always been, is the FBI, with its expertise in kidnapping cases, called in?
We were told the FBI was on its way and it would be a couple hours, and of course they never came.
The Boulder police would only talk to us off camera. But retired FBI agent Ron Walker says the FBI is called in. He gets the call at 9:30 a.m. and immediately sets things in motion, sending agents to the police station to set up a command center.
I thought that Linda Arndt should grab John Ramsey and tell John, we're going to search the house from top to bottom. And from my perspective, that was nothing but kindergarten make work. I wanted him to be busy.
Right.
But I wanted him to be busy in Linda Arndt's presence.
In the presence of her.
In the presence of the officer. And that way, we're not going to run into the situation where for an hour and a half he goes missing again.
Right.
But what I learned later on from Linda is that when she tells John, we're going to search the house top and bottom, and we're going to start at the top, Ramsey is there with Fleet White. He grabs Fleet by the arm and makes a beeline for the basement door. John Ramsey opens the door, says something about finding his daughter, and then turns the light on. Virtually every staged murder case that I have seen, the perpetrator manipulates the arrival of friends or other family members who are then put in a situation where they actually discover the body, or they are with the perpetrator as the body is discovered.
They bring somebody along, they discover the body, but with a witness who can testify to their shock and awe and horror at what they find.
So let me go through what the motives are. Motive number one. You are guilty, Mr. Ramsey, because there was some evidence that your daughter had been sexually molested.
I know, as best I can know, as a father who was with his daughter every day that I was home, she was not sexually abused or molested before December 26th.
Okay, but on December 26th, there are some indications that your daughter was sexually molested.
Well,
therefore, here's the motive. You were doing it. Maybe you'd done it before. Maybe you just did it that night. Perhaps your wife discovered you. Whatever it was, JonBenet cried out. You killed her.
Well, that's fits right in the category of it could have been done by an alien as well. It makes no sense. There is no history. A person doesn't go throughout their lives as a normal human being, one night turn into a monster, slaughter their daughter, go to bed, and get up and act normal from there on. That doesn't happen. In these kinds of cases, virtually all of them, I suspect, where there is child abuse in a family, there's a long history. And that's not the case in our family.
I have to point out that JonBenet's pediatrician, who had been her pediatrician from birth, has publicly said that he never saw any evidence of sexual molestation. There never have been reports from her school, and yet there is the suspicion
was a pedophile, was your daughter sexually abused?
I don't believe there's conclusive evidence of that.
We don't know.
Have you talked to the medical? Did they send you the autopsy reports?
No. The police have not talked to us at all. We don't know what's been done.
Well, they've questioned you, right?
Oh, we've questioned us extensively.
But they haven't told you anything about, you have not seen a death certificate?
No.
No.
You don't know how your daughter died?
Well,
we do. She was strangled.
That's the cause of death?
That's the cause of death.
But you don't know if any sexual activity took place?
It's not clear to me that there was. We don't know. It's one of those questions you don't want to know the answer to, frankly.
In the middle.
That Burke killed JonBenet?
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Did the thought ever cross your mind?
No.
Absolutely not.
It's absurd.
No.
Give me some history that would lead someone to think that, other than he was her brother. What a tragic, sick observation. Burke is a normal child, average at sports, has lots of friends, got A's in school, loved his sister, they were best buddies. He would have protected JonBenet with his life.
Don't even think about it.
Okay, so this would be exactly how tall JonBenet was.
Right, she was
And
3'11".
yes.
So Dr. Spitz, we have a skull, but with pig skin over the top of it to act sort of like the scalp, to see what it looks like if somebody hits it with a flashlight. We're trying to sort of simulate this as closely as we can as a sort of a scientific experiment, but this is quite hard to do, but we do need to do this just to see what it looks like.
Okay. Because there's so much controversy about whether or not a child is actually capable of creating the defect in the skull, we thought it would be good if we actually brought in a child who was about 10 years old to actually do the demonstration with him.
Sure.
We're going to ask you to strike the skull. Where do you think, Dr. Spitz? Round about here?
Okay, and do it here.
So round about there. Okay.
Are you ready?
Yep. Okay.
We'll just take it off here. We're just going to peel this back, and you can see how it's broken. It's very similar to the type of break that we saw on JonBenet.
So, what'd they tell you about why they wanted you to come talk today?
See if they can find who, you know what?
Well, let me tell you a couple things. First, my job is partly to get to know you as best as I can. Make sure that you're okay, because things have kind of been hard, I imagine. Okay. Are you going to school?
No, because I'm trying to stay away from the press. My friend said that after school, there's all these media people waiting there going, hello, did you see Burke in class today? No, I did not. I think he was absent. Oh, thanks. They go,
So do you feel like you're pretty safe?
yeah,
Yeah? Do you ever worry about it?
not really.
No?
I'm just playing my Nintendo.
Yeah. Any secrets, do you think?
I probably do, but I don't really remember them.
Yeah.
And if I did remember any, I don't think I'd tell you.
Why not? I'm a good person to tell secrets too.
Because they're secrets.
That's true. But things changed at your house a lot?
A lot, yeah.
Yeah, what's changed?
Well, you know, the police have it blocked off and stuff.
Well, what about for you and your parents? Okay.
You know, parents are sometimes crying.
Yeah.
But I'm basically just going on with my life. You know.
What do you think happened?
I know what happened.
I mean, when she got killed. How do you think that happened?
I think. Well, I asked my dad where did they find her body, and my dad said I found it down in the basement, and so I think that someone took her very quietly and tiptoed down the basement, and then maybe took a knife out, and or something like that.
Do you think that's how she died?
Or maybe a hammer in the head, maybe.
So what did your parents tell you about your sister dying?
Or just when I got there to the house where the kind of funeral type thing. But my dad said, JonBenet's in heaven now. Just kind of burst into tears.
Not bad. How are you dealing with it now?
I kind of forget about it because I'm just going.
You're just playing your video games all the time.
Go.
But let's take a break. Maybe you could draw your picture of your family for me while you tell me about it. Could you do that for me? We can draw. But it doesn't really matter. It's not a test of your drawing. Just so I get to know your family and stuff like that. So the first person you would draw would be who?
Oh, I got one.
Okay. So who's next? Who would you draw next? Okay. So what's your mom do? She work up at the house?
Work as a mom.
Work as a mom. So what do you like best about your mom? That's it? Was your mom the kind of mom that gives lots of husbands and sisters?
Yep.
Both you and your sister, or just you, or just your sister? Anybody else in your family? Are you going to talk?
What about me?
What about you?
You know, it's been a long, painful process for you. Up to now. Hasn't it? And for your mom and dad?
Probably.
Why do you think you're here?
You want to find out who killed my sister.
Why did you feel scared, you know, when mom came rushing in?
I felt like something bad happened.
You hear mom and dad talking?
I just heard mom like going psycho.
Going psycho?
Yeah, or like, you know.
Did you go down and see what was going on?
Just stay in bed.
So what went through your mind then?
Then I thought, maybe JonBenet is missing. But that's not that likely, so. Yeah, I mean, what are the chances of that happening?
Is there anything about that night, if you can remember hearing anything during the night?
I don't remember hearing anything. Because I was sleeping, you know.
Did you sleep?
I always sleep real deeply and I can never hear anything.
Would you ever go downstairs and downstairs in the basement play?
Yeah, I had a train, electric train there.
How about the last year you lived there? Did you play there much?
Sort of.
Now, when you'd go to bed at night, what was your normal routine? I mean, would you get a snack before you went to bed?
I might get a snack. Not usually.
If you got a snack, what would you normally get? Or what would Mom let you have?
Pudding or yogurt.
Pudding and yogurt? Some parents let kids have cookies and candy and cereal and fruit and things like that.
I think, yeah, she would suggest like fruit and
So what kind of fruits would you typically have at home?
like pineapple maybe.
Yeah, do you like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that your favorite fruit? What was JonBenet's favorite snack?
I don't think she had a snack.
What about pineapple? Did she like pineapple?
Yeah, she liked pineapple. I just had laying in bed with my eyes open and like, so thinking of what might have happened.
Did you hear Mom and Dad talking?
I sure Mom like going sicko.
Going psycho?
Yeah, that's all like,
Did you go down and see what was going on?
Stay in bed.
Is there anything strange about it being out there to you? And you find it odd that it's out there? What did you do next?
Laid in bed with my eyes closed, trying to get to sleep. Kind of wondering, would something bad happen? Would something bad happen? Or what? I was trying to think of what might have happened.
So you're curious.
Yeah.
When you're curious about something, what do you normally do?
Try to find out what the answer is.
Did you do that after Mom came into the room?
No, I figured somebody would probably come in and tell me. Or I would find out later in the day.
Did you really find out that JonBenet was dead?
I was at Bernie's house and I saw everyone was sad inside. And my dad told me that JonBenet didn't have him.
What did you do?
Started crying.
The body of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey was laid to rest in Atlanta.
What do you remember about that? About JonBenet wetting her bed or wetting her pants?
I just remember she wet her bed.
What would happen when JonBenet would wet her bed? What would Mom or Dad do?
Mom would change the sheets and all that stuff. And Dad wouldn't do anything. He had to go work every morning.
Would you leave it there for a long period of time? Like, I mean, are there times when maybe the dishes don't get cleaned up right away? Or do they typically get cleaned up?
If I remember specifically.
911 emergency. Police. What's going on? 15th Street. What's going on there, ma'am?
We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please.
Explain to me what's going on, okay?
There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
A note was left and your daughter is gone? How old is your daughter?
6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old.
How long ago was it?
I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's gone.
Does it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says SBTC. Victory. Please.
Okay, what's your name? Are you
Kathy Ramsey? I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been gone?
No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
Okay, well,
there's somebody.
I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath,
Please,
okay?
hurry.
Kathy. Patsy? Patsy?
A lot about the murder of JonBenet Ramsey. And with the 20th anniversary of Colorado's most infamous unsolved killing, we've seen a deluge of television specials and investigations. But 9 Wants to Know decided to focus on the one piece of evidence heralded as key to solving this crime. DNA that's been in the FBI's national database since 2003. DNA that Boulder's former district attorney is certain belongs to the killer. But now a 9 News Boulder Daily Camera investigation found it's evidence that may be worthless in terms of solving this case, putting that DNA in doubt. It's a murder with 2 competing theories. JonBenet Ramsey was either killed on Christmas night 1996 by someone in her family, or she was killed by an intruder. For more than a decade, those theories played out in the tabloids, on talk radio, even inside the investigation. Then on July 9, 2008,
attorney says new DNA evidence in the murder of JonBenet Ramsey.
Boulder District Attorney Mary Lacey fully embraced the intruder theory.
Clears her family of any involvement in her death.
That just baffled my mind.
Shocking fellow prosecutors.
I wouldn't have done it because I don't think that's the role of the district attorney.
Her successor.
I was stunned. I was also appalled.
And even the Colorado governor who assembled a task force to look into the case.
I couldn't see any reason based on what she said for her to do so. Had never seen anything like that in the past from any other prosecutor, and just couldn't believe she chose to do that.
Lacey's decision was based on DNA she said was conclusive. DNA she said JonBenet's killer left behind on her panties and long johns. DNA that would crack the case if it could just be identified or matched. But the actual DNA test results Mary Lacey used to clear the Ramseys, obtained exclusively by 9 News and the Boulder Daily Camera, tell a very different story.
So I was always surprised at what she did. And now I'm deeply concerned.
It's the latest controversy in a case full of problems. A bungled crime scene, infighting among investigators and prosecutors.
First of all, many of you know that last week,
a decision by former District Attorney Alex Hunter to drop charges authorized by a grand jury against John and Patsy Ramsey. Mary Lacey succeeded Hunter in 2001 with a reputation as a strong supporter of the intruder theory. When she issued her exoneration letter and apologized to the Ramseys, she created the impression that if someone could just identify the person whose DNA profile had been found, the case would be solved.
We now have pretty irrefutable DNA evidence according to the DA's office, and that's the most significant thing to me, and certainly we are grateful that they acknowledged that we, based on that, certainly could not have been involved.
So we had D8, D21.
9 Wants to Know and the Daily Camera took those same lab results to forensic experts.
Yeah.
The first time that data had ever been independently evaluated. And those experts agreed. The DNA results don't come close to proving that an intruder killed JonBenet.
It's certainly possible that an intruder was responsible for the murder, but I don't think that the DNA evidence proves it.
The only way I can describe this evidence is uninformative. It really is, it's not dispositive of the presence of a perpetrator. There is foreign DNA, but that foreign DNA can easily be accounted for by a number of innocent mechanisms.
Male DNA was originally identified in JonBenet's underwear during testing in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Lacey ordered new tests in 2007 and 2008 on JonBenet's long johns and nightgown. It's those tests that led Lacey to exonerate the Ramseys.
I can tell you in my experience,
A decision that confounded Troy Ide, a former U.S. attorney who was on the Ramsey task force appointed by Governor Owens.
there's a real danger whenever you say, okay, we've looked at this and we've categorically determined something.
The experts who reviewed the DNA test data for 9 News and the Daily Camera questioned Lacey's exoneration on multiple fronts. First, the DNA profile Lacey said belonged to the killer may not be the profile of a single person.
There is a reasonable chance that what has been attributed to a single individual actually represents DNA from multiple individuals that has been sort of hobbled together into a single profile.
Well, it's a rather obvious point, but I mean, if you're looking for somebody who doesn't exist because it's actually several people, it's a problem.
And as for the DNA on the Long Johns, heralded by Lacey as conclusive, our experts believe those 2 spots are mixtures of genetic material from more than 2 people.
It looks and appears to me to be at least 3 individuals. And so that there's a mixture here that's not just a single profile.
Which is precisely what Mary Lacey knew before she exonerated the Ramseys. This report, obtained by 9 News and the Daily Camera, went to Lacey's office 3 months before she cleared the family. Of the 2 spots on JonBenet's Long Johns, the report says it's likely more than 2 people contributed to the mixtures. And after eliminating JonBenet's DNA, the remaining DNA contribution should not be considered a single source profile.
She knew, based on your investigation, that this DNA wasn't necessarily from one person, and that it in fact was potentially accumulated DNA. She knew it at the time, and why she used this evidence to clear the Ramsey family then, a clearance that has continued because it's on the public record through today, is something I can't explain, and she should explain.
Mary Lacey never responded to our questions about her decision to exonerate the Ramseys. She left office in 2009, and she didn't respond to our calls, our emails, our letters, or our visits to her Boulder home. And if you think it looks like she set out to prove the intruder theory, you are not alone. Independent experts who reviewed the case told 9 Wants to Know and the Boulder Daily Camera they think Lacey succumbed to a phenomenon well known in human psychology. Understanding the DNA evidence in the murder of JonBenet Ramsey means understanding this. Everywhere we go, we leave little bits of ourselves.
Really talking for 15 to 30 seconds is enough to detect a DNA profile on the desk in front of you.
That reality challenges one of the central tenets of the DNA evidence in the JonBenet Ramsey case. One made public when former Boulder District Attorney Mary Lacey exonerated the Ramsey family in 2008, saying that there's no innocent explanation for genetic material found in the girls' underwear and long johns.
My guess is that if we took your shirt and did some DNA testing on it at the level of sensitivity involved in this case, we'd find your DNA, we'd probably find some other people's DNA on there as well.
Lacey's exoneration letter said she had concluded that foreign DNA on JonBenet's clothing could not have gotten there inadvertently, something our experts say is just not true. They say there are plenty of reasons the DNA on JonBenet's clothing could be innocent, reasons that have nothing to do with murder.
You shed 40,000 cells per hour. You are leaving your DNA everywhere. When wherever you go physically, you're leaving a small part of yourself.
Mary Lacey discounted that possibility when she issued her letter exonerating the Ramseys and concluding the DNA must be the killers.
I thought that was a bit of a leap to claim that there couldn't be an innocent explanation for what was found.
How did Lacey's conclusion differ so much from the actual DNA tests? Lacey was long known to support the theory that an intruder, not a family member, killed JonBenet, something our experts believe could have led her to succumb to what's known as confirmation bias.
In human psychology, we like to see patterns. We like to see puzzle pieces fitted together.
Confirmation bias can affect how an investigator with a theory interprets evidence.
You tend to believe data, which confirms your hypothesis. You tend to think of explanations to refute data, which do not support your hypothesis.
Case in point, these never-before-seen emails. They show that after preliminary tests found the presence of unknown male DNA on JonBenet's long johns, an investigator in Lacey's office replied that his bosses didn't see the need for additional testing.
It sounds like they got a result that they were looking for and decided to quit while they were ahead.
The lab that Lacey used later provided her with reports showing that the unknown DNA on the long johns was likely part of a mixture of genetic material from more than 2 people, but that was never before made public until now. She issued her exoneration in spite of the confusing DNA results, an exoneration the family still points to as proof they were not involved. Just last month, Ramsey lawyer Lynn Wood used the exoneration to challenge news reports suggesting it could be a family member who killed JonBenet. In a tweet, Wood said, in 2008, Boulder DA publicly exonerated them and apologized. DNA evidence conclusive. End of story. And in another tweet, he said, this is a DNA case, plain and simple.
No, it is not. It's clearly not. We have a question profile that is very low level in terms of the amount of DNA. The quantity of DNA is very small. The profile is extremely complex. The one thing this case is not, it is not a DNA case, pure and simple.
The problem with the Ramsey case is not that we don't have enough opinions.
Current DA Stan Garnett stopped short of calling for new testing of the DNA when we showed him what we found. But our experts say if he did, scientists could isolate out male genetic material and make it easier to determine exactly what the DNA might mean in this case.
I'm not going to say what we're going to do. What I will tell you and will assure the public is any reasonable effort that can be done to evaluate the evidence and evaluate whether charges can be filed is being done by my office with the Boulder Police and will be in the future.
Based on our findings, Boulder authorities started talking about what to do. And 9 News and the Daily Camera learned Boulder police and prosecutors met and decided it's time for a new round of DNA testing.
What we're focusing on is solving the case and proving the case. As you know, it's been 20 years and that's not happened.
It's Boulder County District Attorney Stan Garnett's job to file charges against whoever killed that 6-year-old girl in December 1996, if and when the evidence supports it. And now his office is working with Boulder Police to plan a new round of DNA tests.
And certainly the Ramsey case, there's a whole lot more to that case than DNA. DNA is a part of it. We got to make sure that it's tested appropriately through up-to-date modern methods. And we will make sure that happens.
The move comes after a joint 9 News Daily Camera investigation found all kinds of problems with the DNA testing of JonBenet's underwear and long johns. Former DA Mary Lacey cleared the girl's family of suspicion based on that testing. But our investigation showed that male DNA on the girl's clothes may have been left innocently, may not belong to the killer, and may not even be from a single person. Our story led to a meeting in recent weeks among prosecutors, police, and Colorado Bureau of Investigation agents. They discussed new technology and new testing. Garnett would not guess on a timeline.
It's been 20 years of an ongoing investigation, so I understand the curiosity that people have. CBI is efficient, they're careful, they're deliberate, and I'm sure they'll move forward with an appropriate amount of speed.
We don't know what kind of testing they're going to do, but our experts have an idea. Submit JonBenet's undergarments to testing that focuses only on male DNA. That way scientists could determine if that genetic mixture contains DNA from more than one man. And knowing that would tell investigators whether that profile that's been in the FBI's database since 2003 really is the killer's. For 9 Wants to Know and the Boulder Daily Camera, I'm Kevin Vaughn.
Gordon Coombs, and I am a former investigator with the Boulder District Attorney's Office. Being objective and being true to the evidence is the most critical piece of an investigation. When you're investigating a case, you don't try and fit the evidence into what your theory is. That's when mistakes happen. That's when you hear about wrongfully convicted people and cases that go wrong. Mary Lacey's relationship with John Ramsey was unusual. I have never been in a position where one of the suspects in the case is brought into the office for informal conversations. It was not something that I had ever seen, and I would deem it as being pretty inappropriate. If you become too close to the suspect, can you remain objective when prosecuting the case? There's a reason why you keep everybody at arm's length.
While some perceive these visits from John Ramsey as normal, Coombs alleges their close relationship tainted the case.
It was made known that Mary believes the intruder theory, and the overall feeling was you either believed in the intruder theory, and if you didn't, you were at risk of being forced out. You either keep your mouth shut about this case, or you fall in line.
The Boulder County District Attorney formally apologizes in a letter to John Ramsey for the cloud of suspicion his family's lived under for 12 years.
I wrote the City of Boulder, and I copied District Attorney Mary Lacey, and I said, if this investigation is not transferred out of the hands of the Boulder Police Department into the hands of a third-party, objective, competent law enforcement agency, I'm going to sue the City of Boulder, and you're going to be the laughing stock of the country when the truth comes out about the incompetence of your department in this investigation. And I remember sitting there with her, and I said, this has to stop, and only you can stop it. And I'll never forget, she looked at me and she said, I agree with you. And she committed that her department would take over the investigation, which they did. And then District Attorney Lacey issued a public statement to apologize to them and to make clear that going forward from that day, they would be treated as victims because they were, in fact, victims.
You know, it's been said that only a midget can get down into this grate. Well, I'm no midget, and I'll show you how easily it can be done.
Then in 2013, another bombshell.
I had a strong sense that there was a huge story here that had been missed.
Dogged reporter Charlie Brennan investigated and broke a shocking story.
I was able to persuade several grand jurors to confirm for me the fact that they had voted to indict.
No charges have been filed.
The grand jury decision 14 years earlier was not as it had been portrayed. Jurors had actually voted to charge John and Patsy Ramsey. Brennan wanted to get a hold of the grand jury's decision himself. He went to court.
I don't think most of us could believe it. He won, and they unsealed those grand jury records in 2013, and it was quite illuminating.
17 years after JonBenet's murder, the court released 4 true bills or written decisions from the grand jury. The jury recommended indicting John and Patsy Ramsey for child abuse resulting in death and accessory to first-degree murder.
There is insufficient evidence to bring charges at this time.
But Alex Hunter, the DA at the time, declined to prosecute the Ramseys. Hunter would not return our calls.
You must have been shocked.
Shocked would be accurate. It's extremely unusual that a district attorney not sign an indictment when a grand jury returns a true bill.
With the charges that the grand jury had voted to indict, are they referring to a third person?
It does appear that the theory they were looking at assumed that maybe someone other than the 2 Ramsey parents had been involved in what happened.
John Ramsey, although well aware of the grand jury's decision, has his own opinion.
What we were indicted for, which was nonsense, was child abuse resulting in death. And we were told, well, you didn't protect your child. And that's true. I mean, I regret that I didn't set the burglar alarm or check the windows.
What about accessory? They also voted to indict on accessory.
Really? I didn't know that. I don't know even what that means, frankly.
Meaning that you and Patsy helped someone else.
Really? Well, that's absurd. It's just absurd.
A mystery for some, less so for our mysterious juror.
Based on the evidence you were presented, do you feel you know who killed JonBenet Ramsey?
I highly suspect I do.
And who do you think that is?
I wish not to answer that question.